All right, welcome everybody to another victorious edition of the Assembly Call after probably the best IU offensive performance I can remember for a couple years at least. As IU beats Maryland 89-70 in a game that saw IU hit, I think the final total might have been 14 threes. I lost track at some point along the way, but just a phenomenal performance, great environment, everything that everybody hoped it would be coming into the game tonight. So we're here to break it down for you. We are unfortunately without Jerod, who's usually the host. Unfortunate for a number of reasons. One, because he couldn't be there to share in the joy that was this game, and two, because now you're stuck with me attempting to host and hold this thing together. So hopefully I'll be able to be the Colin Hartman-esque glue guy and make this work as we work through the show tonight. But Ryan's here with me to break down the game, and we'll try to talk through it. It's 11 o'clock here in the Eastern time zone, so we'll try to keep this relatively short. But I'm not sure how easy that will be given the greatness of the performance from IU tonight. So I guess I'll start off with this. So Jerod can't be here for his banner moment, but if he could be, I would imagine that he would remind everyone about his thoughts on Yogi Ferrell. And so I'll read to you from the text he sent me last night as we were working things out to get the show hosted. When Yogi scores 24 points and leads us to victory by winning a mano-a-mano battle with Trimble, reminding everyone who best point guard in the conference is, remind everyone on the show I predicted it. So, Jerod, this is for you. This is your banner moment for the night. Yogi, I thought, would end up 3 points short of that after he hit his seventh three because there wasn't a whole lot of time left. But sure enough, he managed to bury another one late, finished with exactly the 24 points that Jerod predicted to me, and just was phenomenal throughout. So I definitely think he quieted some of that. I mean, coming into tonight, Yogi's 7 of 32 from three in Big Ten play, and hit seven big ones tonight. So we'll talk more about him in a minute. So I guess we'll skip to my portion of this, the bottoms line. I think for me it was Colin Hartman really setting the tone early. Um, he came out and hit those couple threes, and I think most importantly really set the tone for what IU wanted to do offensively, and they had him in situations where he was trying to take guys off the dribble, and when they were most effective tonight, which was for large portions of the game, it was when they were able to play with five guys out, and that's something that Hartman being there really enabled for IU because it pulled shot blockers away from the basket, which is really Demontre Dodd for Maryland, but pulled him away from the basket and really eventually just took him out of the game because he wasn't able to match up with Hartman and keep things good there, and really, kind of got him out of there, and then allowed IU to. They made a bunch of threes early. I think at the under 8 timeout in the first half, IU had made one 2-point shot, but Hartman making those threes really pulled everybody away from the basket, opened up some driving lanes, and at least at one point in the second half, Ryan and I were going back and forth that IU had outscored Maryland in the paint or was within 2 points, which seemed like a dream early in the game. But Hartman did a little bit of everything tonight. Between the 3-point shooting, drew a charge, got some rebounds, blocked some shots as we've become accustomed to with him. So I thought he was great, and more than anything, his contribution really allowed the team to play how it wanted to offensively. And if there's anything that I will take away and remember from tonight, it was really how smooth and crisp the offense was. So before I kick it over to Ryan for his rant, which I am assuming will be anything but an actual rant, just remind everybody, if you want to tweet questions, hashtag assembly call, and we'll try to keep an eye on those as we go through the show. But with that, I'll welcome in Ryan and turn it over to him for his rant.
Yeah, I think that you could give the game ball to any number of guys. Yogi obviously is the one who jumps out. I thought his first half was good. I thought his second half was as good as we've ever seen him play, maybe up to the standard of that Michigan game last year that he just won single-handedly at Assembly Hall. But you could give it to Hartman just for his effort and energy and like you said, getting the game started. I mean, those threes at the beginning and just that activity at the beginning really set the tone. And you could give it to Troy Williams because at a point midway through the first half, things kind of hit a lull, and he just exploded and was, doing Troy Williams things, having amazing follow-away layups and dunks and just everything. And so I think that it was really, though the scoring wasn't as spread out as we've seen for Indiana this year, you've only got, 7 guys scoring. You've got and a lot of it is concentrated with Hartman, Troy, Blackmon, and Ferrell. But you've got a lot of contributions coming from everybody. And I got it. If I had to give the game ball to somebody, I'd give it to Tom Crean because he made the change to go to a 5-out, no-in motion system against Maryland. I mean, the offense looked more like a traditional motion offense than we've ever seen it. He went 5-out, no-in at times, using Hartman as more of sort of almost like a stretch four, even though he's really kind of a small forward-ish guy. But he used him sort of on the perimeter instead of, having a token post guy. And that's clearly something they've changed from the last couple games since Hunter Perea has been out. So I think that this was just a really good game plan, and the team executed it flawlessly. They moved the ball, they cut away from when they were away from the ball and weren't open. They, drove when the inside opened up. It was fantastic and such a great night. It really reminded me of the North Carolina game from 2012-13, where it was hyped up as this huge matchup, and Indiana just ran them off the floor. And I thought that the second half tonight was that kind of a beatdown from IU. It was great.
Yeah, I think the thing that was interesting when you talk about the 5-out thing, I mean, the offense was just, you can't say enough good things about it. And I thought it was telling that in the second half, I tweeted this out, and then Crean made me look at least relatively intelligent and said, Hotzel was probably a guy who would see more of the minutes in place of Hartman when he went to the bench in the second half, because the couple times in the first half where they really bogged down offensively was when Holt was in the game. And it wasn't, to me, a commentary on Holt being ready or not ready for this game. It was just the fact that what they wanted to do and needed to do offensively, they couldn't do when he was in the game. He wasn't the same threat, and so it clogged the lane and led to some shots getting blocked at the rim. Versus Hutzel comes in, hits a three early in the second half, and made the nice dish to Stan and got one back from him a possession or two later, and he at least was the threat of that outside shot at that point, and really wasn't doing anything. He's not going to post up. He's really not going to run, direct pick and roll that's going to pull his guy toward the basket. So I thought that was, we think about coaching, I thought it was a good adjustment from Crean, where, I think everybody would have suspected, myself included, that Holt would need to play a really big role in this game. I think I even tweeted out something to that effect, so shows I'm not too smart even for predicting the Hotzel thing. It can go both ways, I guess, but thought that was a good adjustment, and really thought, great game plan from him overall. And obviously making the threes early for Hartman was to me the thing that really set it off. He comes out and misses those shots, maybe they give him a couple more, and we see what happens. But that was key.
Just to jump in, I thought, it was incredible. We didn't see Holt in the second half in meaningful minutes at all, and it's, again, like you said, it's not a commentary on Holt. It's just things were working the other way and keeping the floor spread and moving. And he's not really a guy who can step out on the perimeter and continue, passing around. Maybe in a few years he will be, but he's not that guy right now. And so he's in there to rebound and do stuff on the inside and maybe, get a weak side basket or something. But so I thought, again, it was a really good adjustment. I've said all year, with how this team is setting up and everything, I think this has been Tom Crean's best coaching job. And I think you're seeing in-game adjustments you didn't see before. You're seeing correct, substitution patterns you can't argue with. So I think it's really been a good year for him so far, and we're really seeing that. Especially in these last few games with how things have worked out for Indiana.
Yeah, I agree. So let's talk Yogi. I think obviously a lot of key contributors to talk about in this one. He came out, had 9 points, I believe, in the first half, scored 15 in the second, ended up with 24 points, 8 of 10 from the floor, 7 of 8 from three. As I said, was 7 of 32 coming into the game in Big Ten play from three. Missed a free throw, which was somewhat surprising to most of us. Grabbed a couple of rebounds, 5 assists, and the big among the big numbers is a 0 in the turnover column for him. So I don't think it's any question that this was his best game of the year. But I guess my question for you is, did you see him doing anything differently, or was it just a case of those first couple shots fell and then it was kind of the waterfall effect from there?
I thought that he was more aggressive going to the hoop, and I thought that set everything up because they had to step back off of him, and that freed up the three-pointers. Plus, everyone else hitting threes really spread the floor. I mean, if Indiana's not shooting well, that doesn't happen. So I think it was a combination of things. I don't think he's been bad this year, maybe below expectations, but I also think he's been facilitating for other people more than we've seen in the past. And I think that this year it's really shown up that he doesn't have to score to have a big impact on the game. Tonight, I think that he just got hyped up for facing Trimble. You know, Trimble's getting so much hype, and having Trimble come into Yogi's home floor and all that stuff, I'm sure that was a big motivator. And I think he just had an extra, gear tonight that he took it to, and I think that motivation had a lot to do with it. A lot of people did not expect Indiana to win this game despite being at home, and you just saw that the guys were all fired up. I mean, Blackmon was fired up. You could see him putting extra oomph on everything when he'd go to the hole. You'd see Robert Johnson just grabbing rebounds emphatically. I mean, they wanted this game, and I think Yogi is part of that. Yogi really wanted to win this game and have a good showing. And once a guy like Yogi gets hot, he's not going to stop shooting, and I think that's why he wound up scoring so much. I think he felt it early, and then as the ball kept finding him, he was just in positions where he could make shots. And I didn't really think that any of his shots. I thought one or two of his shots were bad. He one three he took was bad, but it was sort of a heat check three, and sort of a, if this goes down, the roof is going to explode, and that was in the first half. He just fired it real quick, and it rimmed out. But other than that, he was just on target all night, and I don't think it's really anything super different except for he felt one drop and all of a sudden was in his zone.
Yeah, I thought, once the first one, and especially after the second one went in, it kind of had that feeling that, this is, maybe his breakout game where he gets some of that shooting stroke back. And I don't know that, I mean, he wasn't really taking bad shots. I don't know that any of us noticed anything, different about shots he was taking, what he was doing. They just weren't dropping. So good to see for him tonight. And obviously, a huge game, and for him to step up with Trimble. I think Trimble ended up with 10 points. I think 7 of those came in the second half. I think he only had 3 at halftime, and only 1 assist. And I thought Yogi did a good job on him defensively. And I guess we'll talk defense a little bit, just for no other reason than what I'm about to say is a good segue into it. That I thought IU's man defense tonight was much better than its zone. Now, obviously, anyone who watches this with any regularity knows I'm not a fan of the zone defense at all, but I thought they tried to use some matchup zone early and do some things. I thought they gave up some open looks. I thought when they tried to double Des Wells in the post, they gave up a couple open threes off of that. And I really thought their best defense tonight was playing straight up against Maryland. I think, at least inside the hall, advanced numbers looked like about 1.09 points per game for Maryland. So not stellar defense by any means, but against a team that was one of the better teams offensively coming in. I don't think that's terrible. And I think the other thing they did a lot tonight, and sometimes this small lineup leads to that a little bit, is they were able to switch a lot. It seemed like the communication was a little bit better, and it's one of those cases where nobody's really that much bigger than anybody else, so you can almost switch everything and do some of those things defensively. So in addition to that, by the time they really took Dodd out of the game, and Graham to a lesser extent, he's not really a big part of what they do, and started playing smaller, I think at that point, Maryland didn't really go inside too much. Did a little bit to Wells, to Lehman on a couple possessions, but Lehman in particular is a really skilled big guy, but a guy who, despite his size, really likes to play more on the outside. Smotrich is definitely that way. So I thought, again, kind of what they were able to force Maryland to do lineup-wise helped on the defensive end. But any observations from you on the defensive side of the ball? I did not think I would be extolling the virtues of IU's man-to-man defense at any point during the season, but I thought of the defenses they played tonight, that was definitely the best one.
Yeah, I think they're much better defense. I think we've seen flashes of that for a couple games coming in. They're just more aggressive and without fouling, and they're more intent on guarding. I think that you're seeing a lot of zone from this team because of its size deficiency. That helps negate things as far as size goes. But tonight they didn't need it as much because Maryland really doesn't have the kind of size that you want to zone against. I think that you're right. I think that the guys were just more focused, and the fact that they could switch everything on Maryland was a big key and a big part of the reason they won. I think is that they were able to get out on screens and aggressively, hit guys and not open up lanes to the basket by doing so. So it was just a great effort too. I mean, they were playing hard. They were just playing hard, and that hasn't been a problem with this team. But they just seem to be playing smarter over the last few games, and it's showing up in the fact that they're winning games they're not supposed to. I mean, you look at Nebraska, we weren't supposed to win that. Ohio State, they weren't supposed to win that. Maryland, they were definitely not supposed to win this one. So I think that you're just seeing a team evolve and develop and get better, and part of it is the man-to-man defense. It'd be nice to see the zone get to a point where you don't have to worry about it as much. We shall see if that happens, but I think that one example of how this team has grown is against zone defenses. This group used to be lost, and that's what cost them against Eastern Washington early in the season. And tonight you saw Maryland go into a couple zones, and IU just beat them. I mean, it was easy. Just move the ball, realize it's not that difficult if you know what you're doing. I mean, they were in a 1-3-1 for 2 possessions and got out of it, and Maryland also used a press for 1 possession and got out of it, and they used some different zone looks earlier in the game and just had to leave it because IU was attacking it correctly. So I think it was you're just seeing the team grow, and that affects everything from defense to offense to in-game adjustments, things like that.
All right, so let's talk James Blackmon. The announcer on the game mentioned late that it was one of the more quiet 22-point performances that he had recalled. That you kind of look at the stat sheet. And Blackmon was another guy. I mean, at halftime, I tweeted this out. Troy, Hartman, Blackmon, and Yogi were the only guys that had scored. So Blackmon also had 9 points at the half and ended with 22. So he had 13 after the break. A really good mix for him. He hit 5 twos, 3 threes, and 3 free throws. Had 5 rebounds and was once again toward the top of the list for IU from a rebounding standpoint. Troy was the leader with 7, and then Robert Johnson actually had 6, which is one of his higher totals of the season, I would think. Blackmon right behind them with 5, 2 assists, had a couple turnovers, but overall really played well, and I think he was able to carry some of the momentum from a shooting standpoint that he had picked up in the Illinois game back to this game, and really seemed more confident. I thought he really flourished when Hartman was on the floor. He had a couple times where he was able to get by somebody and was able to get layups at the basket. I thought he was one of the ones who, at least for scoring on his own, was able to take advantage of that the most. Troy got a couple off of passes where he got dunks on the baseline, but I thought Blackmon, in terms of guys who were really able to kind of utilize that spacing and get their own shot at the rim, he was the main beneficiary of that. So anything stand out to you tonight about him? I thought this was one of his probably best all-around games, and it's easy to say that after a great performance, and you probably lose sight of and don't remember some of the others. But just in terms of really being able to score from all over the floor and beat teams in different ways, I thought was one of his better games.
No, I agree. I think this was his best game of the year as far as that goes, as far as a well-rounded offensive performance, because most of his points came in the paint going at the hoop. I mean, he hit 3 threes, but you're looking at a guy who hit 5 field goals, and those 5 were almost, and one of them was a dunk, and most of them were layups. And that's the thing about a guy like Blackmon, who comes in as such a highly touted shooter. You've got to be able to do something else, or teams are just going to eat you alive by overplaying the 3. And he's had some struggles earlier in the year, driving into the lane and not going up strong, getting his shots blocked. He's had a lot of shots blocked at the rim. And against Illinois and then tonight, I thought that both games he really started to go a lot stronger. If you're going to go up to the rim one-on-one, you either need to score and get fouled if you're as good as Troy Williams, or I mean as good as James Blackmon. So, and Troy Williams, sure too. But he's got to be able to at least get to the free throw line if he's going to drive one-on-one. So we're starting to see that develop in his game, and I think it's finally starting to get drilled into him that it's not going to be as easy as it was in high school. You're not going to be able to just glide into the hoop and lay it in. You got to go strong. And tonight he went very strong. He was taking contact almost every time he drove, and was fine, finished through it. You've got to finish through contact if you're going to be an elite scorer, especially in the Big Ten. And I thought that was the biggest key tonight. It was great to see him haul in 5 defensive rebounds, have some assists as well. And you're right, he was a huge beneficiary of the floor spacing because he got one-on-one matchups where help wasn't readily available to his defender. And that's huge for a guy like him who can score it in different ways. And he's finally starting to show that he can score just as easily going to the hoop as he can, pulling up for a 3.
All right, so we haven't talked Troy yet, and he typically is a guy that we hit on pretty early in big games that IU has because he's often pointed to as the reason that they played well, and kind of the all Big Ten Troy type of comments. And I thought he got was a little bit out of control early in the game, and um, I think it wasn't like the early Michigan State game when he just didn't seem to have the intensity level and things like that. I thought he was almost trying to do too much and was too amped up and just was showed some of those flashes of out of control Troy that we saw last year as opposed to Big Ten Troy that we've seen this year. But I thought after the first handful of minutes, he really settled down. Ended up with 16 points. He was 5 of 9 from the floor. Took that 1 3 that he kind of got baited into by Maryland, I think, just to see if he would make it. And but with 6 of 7 from the line, I think you tweeted out from the Assembly Call account about how his free throw stroke had improved so much. Looked a lot more confident at the line. I think we saw that late game against Illinois when he knocked down those couple big free throws. 7 rebounds, so led the team in that area. Had 2 of the team's 4 offensive rebounds, a couple assists, a couple steals. Did have the 3 turnovers, but I think with Troy to some extent you're gonna get that. But I think it was Tony Adrani who tweeted out something about in control, and Troy with that level of effort is just beautiful to watch. And I thought after those first few minutes, he really settled in. And I think to a certain extent, as a younger guy and somebody who means a lot to the team and what he's contributed so far, I don't think it's unreasonable for him to be a little bit overly amped for the game. But I thought he did a good job of not letting his early issues linger too far into the game, and I thought he did a really good job of settling down and doing the things that he did well. Got those couple baseline dunks when the offense was really flowing well off of a couple feeds from Hartman, I believe, and there was a play early where Stan got rejected, but he did exactly what you were thinking you wanted Troy to do, and he was in, and it felt like after Stan went out and Troy came back in, he kind of took over that role and played really well. So another strong game from him. He's ever since that Michigan State game. I think he's been averaging right about 16 points a game, and that's what he ended up with today. So another really strong performance from him. That's not really a question at all, but feel free to chime in with your thoughts and praise for Troy. I didn't want to start with the why don't you talk about whatever. So I tried to stay away from that at least, but
That's
that
fine,
was
man.
that was really just like glowing praise and a run-on sentence for me that you can lead into whatever you want to do.
You're a jazz musician, Bottoms, just going off the cuff. It's fine. Troy. I mean, obviously, it was a great game for him. He was super aggressive, and like I said, at times during the first half, he sort of lifted the team when Maryland made a couple runs, and I thought that his aggressiveness was really key in sections there. The thing about Troy is, of the 5 guys who started, he does something different than the other guys. Uh, you know, IU tonight hit 15 of 22 threes, which is 68.2%, which I don't think we've dwelt on that enough. That is huge. 15 of 22. And Troy took one of those, so obviously that shouldn't count against us. That was just a stupid shot. But you've got the other guys who can all spread the floor and hit threes in the starting lineup with Hartman, Blackmon, Ferrell, and Johnson. And then you've got Troy, who's just sort of the slashing baseline assassin at times, and just a guy who's going to get pretty much all his points in the paint. So when he's on, it really takes pressure off the other guys, because then the defense really has to watch the lane and back off. They can't just guard threes because there's this crazy 6'7" guy who's just with insane athleticism cutting right through and making plays happen. So I just think that he's so key because he's different than the other guys. I mean, Blackmon, Johnson, Farrell all do their different things, and different types of things, but they're also interchangeable in ways. There's nobody you can sub in for Troy to do what he does, and so I think that's what makes him so good for this team specifically and this group of players. So, yeah, obviously a great game for Troy. Hopefully, again, with all these guys having great games. I mean, we kind of hit on 3 or 4 guys having career type nights with Blackmon, Farrell, Hartman, and then Troy didn't have a career night, but he had a great night. Hopefully this isn't something where there's a letdown in the next game. They realize what they can do against a team in Maryland who, frankly, had defended everybody really well this year and just got their doors blown off tonight. So, I think it's just a great job by Troy, great job by everybody in that starting lineup, just in flow, in sync together, and really attacking all night long, which I think was the best we've seen this offense all year.
Yeah, so a couple other offensive numbers as you mentioned that to throw out here. I, I don't. The 3-point shooting was one. Obviously, you look at. I'm looking at what in outside the hall or inside the hall. Alex Bozich tweeted out at the end of the game. IU effective field goal percentage 75%. Maryland was actually at 60.4. Now, if you had told anybody in Maryland that that's what you'd be at, and that, for those who don't follow that, kind of basically accounts for the fact that the 3-point shot is worth more than a two, so it gives extra weight to those as you go through. So, 75% is absurd. Even 60% is really high. You tell Maryland you come in and you're at 60% effective field goal percentage, you probably feel fairly good about it. Turnover percentage, IU was a little bit lower at 15.6. They only had 3 turnovers in the second half, I believe. They had 7 at the half, and I think the box score I looked at had just 10 for the game. And then offensive rebound percentage, neither team really did a lot on the offensive glass, perhaps because no one was missing. But both teams are pretty even in that regard. And free throw rate was an interesting one for me because that was an area where I think we talked about this after the last game that Maryland came in. They were one of the top teams in the country there in terms of that's basically your free throw attempts divided by your field goal attempts, so kind of your ratio of getting to the line. They were one of the better teams in the country, I think, in the 40s. So IU kept them off the line only 22.6%. IU is actually at 36, and while I won't get into my thoughts on some of the officiating over the course of the game. I mean, I still thought IU did a really good job of being able to get to the line and isolate guys because of the way they were able to space on offense and draw some fouls that way. And so overall, that led to points per possession. IU at 1.39. I think I saw somebody tweet out toward the end of the game that Maryland had given up 0.9 in Big Ten play and potentially less than that in the season overall because they'd been really good defensively. So it's just some really gaudy offensive numbers for IU to back up a bit of what we had talked about. But one of the things that we haven't talked about is kind of the supporting cast. We talked about the guys who really had huge games. I mean, you had Troy, Hartman, Blackmon, and Yogi all with at least 15 points. I mean, those guys combined for 77 points, if I'm doing the math correctly. So 77 of the 89. But we look at the other guys. So 5 other guys played. I think this was probably one of the first games in recent memory that 10 guys didn't play. Because even since Perea went out, I think Burton had gotten a little bit of time in those games. So this is one of the shorter ones. Definitely in the second half, about the shortest bench we've seen with only playing the 8 guys. As you mentioned, Holt didn't get in. So we had, I'll just kind of run over stats for these and you can pick out who you want to talk about. Robert Johnson ended up with 7 points. Had 0 at the half, so scored all 7 of his points in the second half. Had 6 rebounds, was second on the team in rebounding. Had an assist, 2 turnovers. I thought was steady and really fought defensively in some of those switches where he was guarding. I think he probably guarded somebody at every position for Maryland over the course of the evening on some of these switches. So I thought it was a solid game for him. It wasn't spectacular from a number standpoint, but I thought he didn't really need to be either. Hotzel hit that big 3 in the second half, so he had 3 points and an assist. Holt ended up with 1 rebound, missed a couple shots, had a turnover. Like we said, didn't play in the second half. Stan was a train wreck in the first half and got the nice basket in the second half off the dish from Hotzel, but had 2 points, 2 rebounds, 2 turnovers. He was a little bit erratic, as we've come to expect from him to a certain extent. And Zeisloft, I don't know that he really played a great deal in the second half either. Only took 1 shot for the game, had a rebound and a steal. And 3 fouls in a number of minutes that I cannot see on here. But any thoughts on those guys? And it was kind of an odd game in the sense that we've talked a lot on the show about how important the bench has been for IU, and at halftime they had no points at all, and picked up looks like 5 in the second half, which is better than 0, I suppose, but. But one of the, certainly IU playing a really good game without getting a lot from the bench in terms of scoring was interesting to me because the games that we've all felt that IU played the best was that somebody had stepped up there. Now, the challenge obviously with Hartman in the starting lineup is that you took off one of your more productive bench guys and inserted him into the starting lineup. So to a certain extent, I think that's to be expected. But just give me your thoughts on the bench. Any concerns about what IU did or didn't get out of those guys, or did they find ways to make enough plays that they still contributed?
Yeah, I don't think it's anything to really worry about because we've seen the bench step up at various times during the year. I think that really what you had tonight was, I mean, you got Troy playing 30 minutes, you got Hartman playing 29, you got Blackmon playing 32, Yogi playing 37, and Robert Johnson playing 29. They're playing the entire game, for the most part. So I don't think you really needed much from the bench tonight. I mean, Robinson, Stan played 11 minutes probably because of his defensive prowess, and he showed some aggressiveness. He lost the ball, as you said, the turnovers we expect from him from time to time. Zaislav played 15 minutes. I didn't realize that. I know he played a lot in the first half. But, you know, it's the kind of thing where it's all about the flow of the game and the matchups. I thought Max Hotzel came in the second half and looked great in stretches, and I thought he looked great at times against Illinois. You've got to get contributions from the bench, but I think that they don't all have to be points. I think that you can get guys coming in and just being solid and doing their job, especially when you've got the starting five playing that well and you want to sit them for a minute and then bring them back out. I mean, like I said, Yogi played 37 minutes, and really there was no reason to take him off the floor unless he needed to get a drink of water because he was playing so well. And I think in the second half, especially Blackmon was the same way. You didn't really need to take him off the floor. So, it's hard to really judge the bench tonight because they got so many minutes and so much scoring out of the starting five. So it's not something I'm concerned about. I mean, Zeisloft, we know if he's in a game and he gets good looks, he's going to hit threes, and he's sort of come back, more towards normal in these last few games in getting his open looks and hitting them. And Stan's going to be aggressive and drive and maybe go to the free throw line. You know what Holt's going to give you a solid game in the post. They just didn't need him tonight. And so these guys, you know what you're going to get from them. And I don't think it's really a concern that they didn't have many points tonight, especially given the scoring that we got from the starting five.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, it didn't worry me too much. I was a little bit worried at halftime because I really didn't feel like anybody had stepped in and done a whole lot. But I think you can definitely point to plays in the second half where certainly Hotzel came in and gave really good minutes, particularly with not playing Holt. I thought Hotzel was that much more important. So I thought he was really key. And Stan, for those couple minutes, played much more under control than he did in the first half. And so I thought that was a positive as well. And again, I think some of it's matchup based, and um, you know, if it ain't fixed or if it ain't broke, don't fix it for IU tonight. So I thought they stuck a lot with the guys who were playing really well. So we got a Twitter question here from Devoted Hoosier that I thought was a good one, and I actually saw a couple of the national guys talk about this a little bit on Twitter, at least kind of tweet this out, and at least in a couple cases saw some differing of opinion offered by IU fans. In one case, myself. In the other case, Justin Albers. But his question is, real question: does Hartman start even when Honor is back and healthy? I vote yes. So I'll go ahead and kind of give my thoughts, and then you can feel free to chime in on this as well. I think when I look at what they were able to do tonight, it's a hard thing to do to say that Honor should go back in the starting lineup, and I do think it's somewhat matchup based. But if tonight, IU can force other teams to adjust to them by playing Hartman, which is really what I felt like happened tonight. I mean, it really forced Maryland to not play Graham, not play Dodd, because of how Hartman was playing and the fact that those guys really couldn't handle him. I thought that was really important, and I think if you can continue to dictate some of those matchups, I have a hard time going away from Hartman in that case. I think what you run into at that point is what you really do with Honor, because that almost relegates Holt to not playing at all in a similar way to what you do tonight. Now, I think it's probably too much to read into a game like tonight. You're going to need a bigger post guy at some point. Maryland, while they do have some size, doesn't dump the ball inside a great deal, and so maybe you need somebody more like that. But I do think as kind of the primary lineup, primary offense that this team needs to run to be most successful, it's running this kind of 5-out type system and being able to draw guys away from the basket. But I do think there are times when you'll need Honor and he might play more minutes. But I think that's no different than when Hartman was coming off the bench, and depending on the matchup, you might need more minutes from him. as you would go through it. So I guess I tend to be in the camp that again, if it ain't broke, don't try to fix it. Then leave Hartman in the starting lineup. But I think with the understanding that that doesn't mean that Perea is going to play 8 minutes a game. That there may be games when, as the situation dictates, they need a little bit more from him. But I guess it's my take on it. And why don't you give me your thoughts on how you'd answer that question, at least for now? It was kind of split between the national guys I saw. I know Eamon Brennan from ESPN seemed to suggest that he thought that you'd rather have Perea there, even if he's not a guy you dump the ball into a lot. And it felt like Rob Doster from College Basketball Talk on NBC was a bit of the opposite opinion. So Ryan, weigh in on your thoughts. I don't know if there's a tie to break, but let me know what you think about that.
I mean, it's such a tough question. It really is, especially because we're in the blush of seeing them play so well tonight. I thought there were times versus Illinois where on the inside they did miss some kind of a shot blocking presence. I know Colin Hartman had three block shots tonight, which is the third time he's done that this year. But at the same time, the thing about Perea is he's an intimidating shot blocking presence at times, and I think that it's very important to have that on a team. Now, would I start him? It's really going to depend on the matchup. I would go matchup to matchup. I wouldn't say this is our starting lineup, this is what it is. I've never believed in that. I think you put the best five guys to match up with the other team out on the floor. Now, I know a lot of people are saying, well, why don't you be proactive and make them adjust to what you're doing? Because you're going to run into somebody who's got a 7-foot post guy who's just going to dump it down, or a 6'11", 7-foot, 6'10" guy who's just going to throw it down and lay it up over you. And it's not going to matter what you do. Yeah, you'll have the advantage on offense, but on defense, it's going to sting you. And quite frankly, I've always thought defense is more important than offense. So I tend to err on the side of that. So it's really, really hard. I think if you're playing Maryland like we were tonight and Hunter is healthy, I like having Colin Hartman in the starting lineup because I think defensively he can do what you need to do. Now, against a team with a lot of size, I know Purdue's coming up. That's going to be tougher without Hunter because you need the size to battle what they've got. They've got a lot of size and not great guard play. So it's it's tough, and I think it's going to be a situation where Crean's got to make some tough decisions, but that's why he's paid well, and he's got to figure out what to do. The other thing is, I also don't think it's that important who starts and who sits, because you can always sub a guy out if you're having a problem, and insert a new person in the lineup and try a different look. So I think people get too caught up in who's starting, who's not starting, and things like that. So, because everybody was saying, oh, Holt should start, and then Hartman started. People were asking, why isn't Holt starting? Well, doesn't really matter. These guys are going to get minutes, and it's about who's finishing the game and who's playing the most. So I would go matchup by matchup, but right now, while he's out, there's no need to change anything, I don't think, right now, and we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
All right, so trying to get a few things from the post game press conference. Nothing too much stands out. I saw at least a couple things where Crean referenced that after the team got back from Illinois on Sunday that Yogi was in the gym pretty late into the night working on his shot and kind of about his work ethic. So I thought that was an interesting tidbit based on some of the conversation that we had earlier. Mark Turgeon, that was the best atmosphere we've played in all year. They were fired up, so definitely kudos. I know we've talked at times about the fans and everything else, and Ryan and I both during the game we're talking about, man, how we miss being there and the chances to see games like this. And I said, pretty much from the moment I saw this morning, I got up and was looking through Twitter, and there were people tweeting pictures at 5:30 where they got in line at 5:30 in the morning to be able to get into the game. So pretty much spent the whole day wishing that I was still a student and was there. So I thought the fans were great tonight. Yogi talked about making a couple threes. It opens up the basket. Everything gets bigger. Talked about, this is Yogi again, Colin, Max, and Emmett may be a little undersized. They have a lot of heart. Heart can take you a long way. I think that's definitely what we saw a lot about Hartman there. Was important. And I guess the last one I'll talk about was Tom Crean said today's walkthrough was the shortest he's had at Indiana. They were so locked in. And I thought that showed early on because in a lot of the games, IU has really gotten off to slow starts, it seems like. And I thought tonight was the exact opposite and really just what they needed and kind of obviously the crowd just feeds on that. They came out, they hit a bunch of threes early, and got off to a really good start. I thought that was really key to the game. I know, Bob Knight would always talk about, the first 5 minutes of each half, and I thought in both of those cases tonight, IU was really good. In that first segment early, they got up, they were up 12-5 with the under 16 timeout, and then I think they outscored Maryland 9-3 in the first, before the first TV timeout in the second half. And I mean, I think you build up, that's 13 points right there. You build up a 13-point lead in those two kind of key segments and really set the tone. I thought that was important. So I guess, kind of reading that quote now, it jives together and makes sense a little bit. But so we've touched on a lot about the game. Ryan, I'll kind of throw it to you, not quite for final thoughts yet, but either whether there's any quotes you saw or anything about the game that stood out to you that we have not been able to touch on yet, then we'll look forward to Sunday's game and wrap things up. But anything else that we haven't touched on that struck you tonight?
Well, my favorite Tom Crean quote from the press conference was, quote, Colin Hartman's mom might know the last time he had 3 blocks, but I've never seen it. Well, actually, Tom, he had 3 blocks against Ohio State, and he had 3 blocks against Texas Southern, so you have seen it before. But no, I think it's indicative of where this team is at right now, that Yogi spent so much time practicing his shot after they got home from Champaign on Saturday. That was a win. I mean, they were coming off a win, and he got in the gym and started working on his shot. And that's the effort you need. That's the Victor Oladipo drive we've been looking for from some of these guys. Just the desire to get better constantly and to improve. And you're starting to see these guys get better. It may not be as rapid as some people want, and yeah, this team has warts. I mean, it doesn't have a big man it can get easy buckets with in the post. It doesn't have the greatest defensive execution at times, but these guys are fighting hard and they are getting better, and that's huge. I mean, it's absolutely huge because this team is going to be as good as it can make itself. I mean, and I know that's such a cliched kind of thing, but it's so true about this team because of its limits. What it lacks in certain areas, it has to make up for in effort, and I feel like they're doing that over these last few weeks.
Sorry, I can get myself mute there. That's pretty close. Made it 45 minutes without really screwing something up, so that's good. So we look ahead to the next game for IU is Ohio State on Sunday afternoon. I believe it's a 1:30 Eastern tip on CBS, at least from what I can recall. So since these two teams last met, Ohio State has won some games, but they're an interesting team from a tournament perspective when you really look at what they've done, because they don't have any great wins so far. Their Big Ten wins to this point have been over Illinois, on the road against Minnesota in overtime, at home against Michigan, and then tonight they won at Northwestern by 2. D'Angelo Russell was amazing in that game, had 30-some points, and had a really big game. But at this point, I mean, they really don't have a win over anybody who is a tournament team, at least that would be an at-large tournament contender. Maybe Colgate, as an example, might be one who gets in, but they really don't have any wins. So it becomes a pretty big game for Ohio State in that scenario. So since they played IU, they're 2-1. They won against Michigan at home, lost at Iowa, and gives Iowa a sweep over them on the year, and then won at Northwestern tonight, as I mentioned. So a pretty big game for Ohio State, and you can definitely see them coming into that game feeling a lot of pressure, but also a lot of excitement to be able to try to knock off Indiana. With IU, you've got kind of the potential letdown situation after a huge game like tonight. And really, the stretch for IU is difficult. I think if I calculated this correctly, which is entirely possible that I didn't, it's 4 games in 10 days starting now. So they've got Maryland tonight, obviously, then at Ohio State on Sunday, at Purdue on Wednesday, and then Rutgers at home next Saturday. So I think that's 4 games in 10 or 11 days. It's kind of a grind, and obviously we're just at the start of that stretch and got a little bit of an extended break with a Thursday game. So I wrote myself a note that we had to make picks for the Ohio State game before we got off, since we're doing that now. Now, how other people can get involved in that, I will leave that to Jerod to tweet out tomorrow to solicit picks from everybody else. But so Ryan, why don't you give me your quick thoughts on the Ohio State game, and then who you're picking in that one?
See, it's really hard to pick this game. It's going to be on the road against a ranked IU team. Ohio State's going to be fired up, I'm sure. They backs against the wall. We're supposed to be one of the top two or three teams. We've got Indiana at 5-1 in conference, 15-4 on a what are we on a 4-game winning streak now? Um, and one of those games was Ohio State. It's so tough to call road games in the Big Ten. And there's definitely a huge opportunity for a letdown here for IU to come out so on fire and then have an afternoon game that usually have sluggish starts. So I'm going to pick IU because I didn't pick them tonight and it bit me. I thought Maryland would win a close one, and I pretty much got that 100% wrong. IU wanted a blowout. So I'm going to pick IU on the road in what I believe will be another upset because I think that Ohio State's going to be favored.
Well, I don't know that anybody at the beginning of the season would have expected that me, who has been deemed the most pessimistic, well, deemed, I'm assuming deemed, the most pessimistic of the three of us, would have picked IU in the game tonight, and you would not have. And I honestly don't know, as much as the, kind of realist part of me that doesn't want to get too high after a win like this would say this is the absolute perfect time for a letdown. I honestly can't even feel in any way compelled to pick against IU after as well as they played tonight. So I'm gonna call for another road win because why the hell not? They've won a couple of road games already in the Big Ten this season, and after tonight, I think the flip side of tonight, outside of the letdown, is the amount of confidence that I'm hoping that these guys have and that they should feel for what they were able to do. And quite honestly, I think they could get Ohio State into a similar situation where they end up playing a bit smaller because Amir Williams has been, nothing short of a bust in his career there. And really, outside of him, Ohio State doesn't have a lot of guys that they typically play that are over 6'7". So I think you could get yourself into a situation where it's another one where the loss of Perea isn't felt all that much, and you have IU able to play with some of these lineups that they've been most successful with. So we'll see if that actually shakes out to be the case, but I feel hard pressed to pick against IU in that game after the performance from tonight, which may be the exact reason that I should pick against him, but I'm not going to. So I can only assume that if Jerod was here, he would pick IU as well. I'm sure he'll let everyone know of his pick on Twitter, but knowing him, I have to think that after this he would be in much the same boat that we are and go with IU. So with that, we're closing in on midnight for me. Ryan, you've got a long night ahead of you on the West Coast, so this has no bearing on you. But some of us have to get up and go to work tomorrow after we do stats after this postgame. So I should feel like I should wrap this up. So let's go to final thoughts. We'll take yours first, and then I'll just reread Jerod's tweet where he saw the future about Yogi, and we'll close this thing out.
Yeah, I think that again, IU tonight surprising people, and it's been doing that. The Hoosiers have been doing that all throughout the Big Ten so far. I mean, there are probably people who thought we'd be sitting at 1-5 right now, and that wasn't really out of the realm of possibility considering where this team was a few months ago. Instead, tied for first place with Wisconsin at 5-1, with a 15-4 overall record, and looking trending upward. And I think it was just a huge win, one of the biggest wins of the Tom Crean era. I think undoubtedly, top 10 probably win of his tenure, maybe top 5 given where this team is and how badly it needed this win to keep the momentum going, especially with tough games coming up on the road at Ohio State, on the road at Purdue. Then we get a bit of a reprieve with Rutgers, hopefully, and then on the road at Wisconsin. So this is a tough stretch of games coming up, and IU really had to get a win out of one of these next couple, and getting the win early at Maryland and the way they did. I mean, that was as well as this team has played. And I think it's a huge, gigantic, big, exciting win, and everybody, has a right to be celebrating tonight and being excited, but we got to get back at it Saturday. That's going to be a tough road game to win, and we know road games are always tough in the Big Ten, but that's going to be an Ohio State team that's looking to put a pelt on the wall to improve its tournament chances, and now IU has become one of the teams that teams are going to aim for to take out and help their tournament status. And I don't think anybody saw that coming at this point, this early in the year. So great win. Really excited for this team. They played great. They should be happy with that tonight, and then they got to get back to work tomorrow.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's definitely an interesting scenario to be in compared to where everybody probably thought it would be to the season. I guess that's probably what I'll end on. And I think as I looked at today and how much I anticipated the game, look forward to it all day, and playing such a meaningful game at this point in the season. I know it's only January, but you know, these are the kind of games that I think those of us who have followed IU basketball for a long time kind of relish the chance to watch and be fans of and get involved in. And I thought, it's just a great feeling to do that. And I think a lot of people are getting caught up in the oh, why aren't people talking about this with Tom Crean and his job was in jeopardy and all those kinds of things. And while I get why people are saying that, I mean, to me, as I think about myself and what I felt in the off season, I don't think the performance on the court is a reason to not have felt that way about the way the program was headed, what guys were doing off the court, and those kinds of things. What I do think is important, because to me that's all hindsight of, everybody was jumping on the bandwagon, and it's easy to say now, oh, where are those people now? Well, some of the people saying where are those people now were those people then. And so what I would say as somebody who was, pretty upset about it and have been admittedly not a huge Crean fan over the last couple seasons would be, to me, that stuff, it still matters. It's still important. But what I think he deserves credit for is the fact that that stuff has really been squelched from that point forward. You haven't heard about those things. You've really seen this team band together. You've seen them rally around Devin Davis and those kinds of scenarios, and you've seen him do what I don't think there's any question is his best coaching job. And so for as critical as I can be at times of substitution patterns and all the other things, those things are legitimate things to criticize at times, but I would also say that as you look at games like tonight where he's really been able to adapt to the personnel and come in with a good game plan, I think you can praise the coaching job he did without completely saying that, well, none of the other stuff mattered and it shouldn't have mattered to begin with. And that's kind of what I feel like there's a lot of out there right now. So maybe that's just me, but I do think those things can be separated from one another. And I could not be happier with the coaching job he's done, could not be more impressed with what he's done thus far. And that doesn't mean that if he does something weird in the Ohio State game that I'm not going to come on here and question it. But I do think he's done a really good job of adapting to what this team has and doesn't have. And as we've talked about over the course of the season, this team's strengths and weaknesses haven't really changed a whole lot. But I think what has changed is his ability to figure out how to mask some of the weaknesses and accentuate some of the strengths. And I think that's what was on full display tonight. This team didn't get any better defensively. They didn't play elite on defense, but they got better. And offensively, they're really able to accentuate what they did well and use that to their advantage. And I think that's where he deserves a ton of credit. Doesn't, to me, exonerate him from any of the things that went on earlier on, but I think doesn't mean he doesn't deserve a ton of credit for what he's been able to do this year. So it's probably about as well as I can put it for this edition. So as I mentioned, I'm going to go up and work on stats, so we'll get the newsletter out in the morning, I would imagine. For those who are not subscribed, I think it's simply called /subscribe. This is where it really helps to have Jerod, who has this stuff memorized, and it's like second nature to him versus me, who half pays attention when he says it because I know I don't have to worry about it. So anyway, go out to assemblycall.com, figure out where you subscribe. I'll do some lineup analysis, which luckily Crean made a little bit easier for me in the second half by playing a shorter bench. And we'll be back on Sunday afternoon, probably around 3:30 Eastern. Again, the game 1:30 tip on CBS. So I'll sign off for now, and we'll be back at full strength with Jerod here on Sunday. And so another great Hoosier victory tonight, 89-70. I may, while I'm watching the stats, just go flip this back onto my DVR and attempt to relive it. A bit less stressed, but we'll still be able to enjoy it nonetheless. So thanks for everybody who joined us. We had a lot of live viewers tonight for a late game, so I appreciate those of you for sticking it out with us late into the evening. And we'll catch you guys on Sunday when we're back with the Assembly Call. Thanks, Ryan.